Good morning and welcome to Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Tucson, Arizona. We are a welcoming congregation, and we want you to know that whoever and wherever you may be, whether you are joining us for the first time or after an extended absence, whether you are an occasional visitor or a Sunday regular, you are welcome in this space. We are glad that you are here. Because our beautiful new building is currently closed due to the high level of COVID here in Pima County, we come to you today from our respective homes through the magic of Zoom. I am Debbie Roberts, a pastoral associate here at MVUU. This congregation is served by the Reverend Dr. Samantha Wilson, who is in her third year as our interim minister. Robin Bausell, another PA, will also be taking part in today's service. I want to give a special shout out today to Lee and Todd McNeely, our AV wizards, without whom this service would not be possible. Thank you for your commitment of time and energy. Our theme today is Inspiring Transformation, which is the third of the three parts of our mission statement. We've already taken a close look at the first two parts, open-hearted engagement and courageous love. These are the words that we have chosen to guide our thoughts and actions and give voice to our intentions. They are at the core of what we do here at MVUU. During the month of January, we have also been taking a look at the past with the goal of guiding us into the future. And we've been doing that through the eyes of our former ministers. MVUU has been guided by three ministers. And during the two previous services, we have heard from both Reverend Susan Manker-Seal, our first called minister, and Reverend Joy Atkinson, who was our interim minister before we called Reverend Ron Farris, who will be sharing some thoughts with us today. As we light our chalice, let us consider these words from Reverend Manish Mishra Mazzetti. The reading is entitled, Nothing is Static. The ground shifts, sometimes slowly, sometimes like an earthquake, reminding us that the solidity we often love and seek is an illusion. The crumbling dust of the desert plains, the moist fertility of farmlands, the ending coastline of tidal shores, all are changing. Committees dissolve and are created. Leaders retire or step away. Ministers come and go. Bylaws are amended. New experiences lead to new truths, which foster evolution. The natural course of life is always pushing us toward greater understanding of what it means to be human. Everything about our existence points toward change, flexibility, and dynamic recreation. And it's hard because change involves loss. Can we hold the losses well while not holding ourselves back? The ground shifts, sometimes slowly, sometimes like an earthquake. Nothing is static.
With love as our guide, we covenant to welcome the stranger, encourage one another, to honor diversity, and ask questions lovingly. With love as our guide, we covenant to seek comprehension. Together we listen, trusting love as our guide, we covenant to keep faith and remain as we begin again, as we light our chalice fire. To this we aspire, as we light our chalice fire. To this we aspire.
I'm going to begin this part of the service with a reiteration of the quote that we've been considering over the last couple of weeks. This is from the Reverend Dr. Parker. We receive who we are before we choose who we will become. We are born into relationship before we shape relationships by our conscious intention. We inherit covenant before we create covenant. Covenant making must begin with the question, what have we been given? What is the covenant we are already in? What they dreamed be ours to do, we sang yesterday morning. It is important for us to remember this side of things, that we are first of all relational beings, shaped by history, by a community of faith. Our exercise of free choice is in the context of relational existence. So, inspiring transformation, what is that? How does that happen? Can we be transformed through the practice of our religion, through living our principles? The Englishman John Newton, whom you may know as the author of the hymn Amazing Grace, was brought up in a religious household in the 1700s. His mother died when he was quite young, and he took to the sea with his father, later becoming a master navigator and engaging in the very lucrative trade in enslaved people, thus abandoning the religious beliefs with which he had been raised. After nearly dying in a shipwreck, he turned his back on the high seas and eventually became a minister. As his faith matured, Newton's remorse over his involvement in the slave trade surfaced. He became a spiritual mentor to a prominent abolitionist and later wrote a pamphlet entitled Thoughts upon the African Slave Trade, a graphic account of his experiences aboard slave ships and his personal involvement in the sale of enslaved people. This helped lead to the abolition of slavery in England in 1807, which he lived to see. He was transformed from a faithless seaman to a man of deep faith, who actively worked to undo some of the harm he had caused. His transformation was inspired by his religious beliefs. Our UU principles, had they existed then, could have led to this transformation, as we believe in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, with the goal of having a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. I do think that living our principles, really digging deep and exploring our ingrained beliefs, and consciously making an effort to live and think in accordance with these principles can lead to inspired transformation, especially at times when we, like Newton, are foundering and looking for a way to ground ourselves. This third part of our mission statement will be explored further as our service goes on here today. But first, Reverend Sam spent some time talking with Ron Farris yesterday. a recovering Ron, as the whole family, with the exception of our beloved Grandma Jill, has been dealing with COVID. It even impacted the celebration of Minnie and Cora's, can you believe it, 11th birthday, much to their disappointment. I am reminded of the process of developing our former mission statement with Ron and the evenings many of us spent wordsmithing in the sanctuary at Cromwell. I also remember that one of the words we threw around was transformation. And I have not forgotten Ron's determined opposition to using the word transformation in that document. Perhaps it is poetic justice that Ron is coming back to speak to us on a Sunday when we are considering inspiring transformation.
Reverend Ron.
Hello.
Hi. How are you? Where are you?
I am in North Vancouver COVID headquarters, Ferris Terrace on 3rd Street. And we've been bunkered down for a week and a half now, hopefully emerging from that and feeling better every day a little bit. But that's where we are, North Vancouver.
Now, I know I asked you to come do this conversation with me when we thought we were heading into a lower risk time and we thought we were going to do a building dedication. But I'm very grateful you said yes. I don't know what it's like though. What's it like? You're not even getting to see all the congregants. You're talking to me and yet you're talking to them. I don't even know how that feels.
Yeah. I'm talking to my memory of Mountain Vista, I suppose, which is a little unfair because you all are actually seeing a real sort of recorded but live version of me, at least a present day version of me. But the cast of characters from my days in Mountain Vista has stayed with me, and actually informed my ministry up here quite a bit. The relationships, the impact of the relationships linger for a long time. Look, I'm really thrilled that Mountain Vista has a home. And because it's been a long time coming, and it's well deserved. And I can't wait to see what happens at Mountain Vista now that you have roots. Because we've been a bit rootless for a while, and that's provided a lot of challenge. One thing I've been remembering this past week is as we were preparing, or maybe it was while we were moving, because we did a couple of hops, skips, and jumps along the way. I remember one of the sort of preaching themes that emerged was gird for the weird. And
people still say that. People remember you saying
gird
that.
for the weird. And someone gave me a girdle, which I don't know if it survived the move, to be honest with you. But pretty soon y'all be able to take off your girdles. Yeah.
Maybe pandemic.
We knew it was going to be stressful, and so try to keep it as lighthearted and fun as possible for as long as we could. So knowing that we didn't know what was ahead of us necessarily, that place was probably going to be definitely going to be temporary, but we didn't know if it was the first of how many temporary stops we'd be making, and so it just felt like we needed to be prepared with some humor for the unexpected and for the slightly uncomfortable. And I think we actually got a good bit of discomfort along the way. In fact, everything from too small chairs to awkward meeting times. The Sunday afternoon meeting time was far from ideal. but Mountain Vista remains and rolled through it, and evidently had their girdles on enough to successfully complete the mission and find a new home. So
What was the Mountain Vista you met at the beginning, and how was Mountain Vista when you left?
I think that not only just the core, but the main of Mountain Vista really did care about Unitarian Universalism and each other. And that was here before me, and I don't think I killed it. So that remained after I was gone. So in that sense, it didn't change a whole lot. When I got to Mountain Vista, we were pretty solidly family style church in our operations. Although always punching above our weight class, I think, in terms of programming and ambition, and usually doing so with some success. It was always a really dynamic community with a lot going on. So I think like there was a moment when that we recognized that, and in fact that was kind of what said, all right, it's time to get a bigger place, a place that has maybe a more substantial place, and so that the move was rooted in that sort of culture of wanting to grow as a community, as an ability. And however, the move never allowed us to quite hit that level, I don't think, until Mountain Vista finally settles into their home. Then they'll be able to like emerge from this chrysalis that they've been in for several years. So I think I left them while they were still in chrysalis. Yeah. So they were in the midst of transformation, and seemed to be on a trajectory out of it. But yeah, it was unresolved. So I found them in a more resolved state when I left them, I think, or left them when I departed anyway. But the resolution had an intention, or the hope for resolution, right? It was an intention, but it was still an intention when I left. Had a trajectory, but still an intention.
The tag-along question I had to Mountain Vista transforming is also about you. They are looking for their next called settled minister. Who were you when you showed up for them? And then who were you when you left?
I was a new minister, and it was a great place for a new minister. It was a great place to learn how to do ministry. And I was fortunate that I think they understood shared ministry, and there was a number of folks there who I think understood their role as congregants as ministerial in some degree, and that was really rewarding. And I learned a lot, right? And so I was new when I got here, and when I left, I was wiser, I hope, and a little more cynical, right? Because some of the things that are supposed to work, didn't work. Um, and some things maybe I thought would be easy weren't. But that's, it's not overly cynical. It's more like healthy cynical. That's kind of the other side of wisdom, maybe. Although, again, sort of like Mountain Vista was who it was when I got there and after I left. There's, for better and worse. The same applies to me, I think. So the same disposition, the same dreams for ministry and for Unitarian Universalism, or if not the same dreams, the same sort of way of dreaming.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is there anything you look back on in your ministry now that you feel like you understand better or differently that you didn't understand then, or?
I think that there are probably lessons that I should have learned that I just didn't.
Uh-huh.
Which probably means that I never will. Like conflict is hard and it stinks. And that's just like, that's a thing. I don't have anywhere to put that in response to your question, but that's like where my mind went. I think one of the things I would like to have learned, or maybe I should have learned, is that I wish in the midst of conflict, I had the ability to sort of hover up to a 10,000 foot sort of perspective and just sort of stay there and provide ministry to everybody instead of getting in the trenches, right? But that's not what I've done, and it still isn't what I do. Although I can see the benefit of it, and even more so because I don't think I do or manage conflict in congregations particularly well. And I'd like to see somebody who does, but it's not me. So, and which isn't to say that like my time there was filled with conflict. There was a couple, and one about the building, which kind of like hit a crescendo, both metaphorically and literally, at one point. But I think even that, particularly at Mountain Vista, operated along the lines of a family type system and worked itself out in a similar fashion after time. So, I sort of wish that from that experience, I would be like, oh, I see this thing coming, and now I can go and elevate and be a calm, non-anxious presence, but I don't.
So Debbie Roberts has a memory of you all working on the 3 values that you had: welcome, care for, and inspire.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a memory where you really were strongly, or you were not interested in the word transform, but you were interested in the word inspire. So I don't know if you remember that or not.
I remember being suspicious of the word transform I
There you go. Okay. Healthy skepticism. So ironically now, the new value is inspiring transformation. What do you think it means? And if that was a real thing in congregational life, what would it mean?
yeah. So I think that it's interesting. Transformation, in some ways, takes no inspiration because it is the fundamental law of the universe. Everything is always changing, right? Uh, and so many of our institutions are designed, in fact, to keep us from transforming. Like institutions are designed to preserve in many ways.
Mm.
And maybe that's where we as a culture writ large are getting it wrong a bit, right? So inspiring transformation, I think there's like a hidden clause in there, I guess, because a qualifier of some kind. Because it's not just that you're inspiring transformation, because A, you can't help but transform, and B, you could transform into something monstrous, right? So you have to inspire a kind of transformation. What kind of transformation are you looking for? And so that was my first thought when I saw those things. It's like, okay, so then inspiring becomes directed. That to me, it's the direction. And it's the direction of the transformation, which is very necessary. Transformation, of course, is a very much used word in religious circles, and loses its meaning after a while. And of course, oh my God, every congregation wants change until it happens. Right now, it's interesting, Mountain Vista, that you want transformation. Oh, you've been going through a transformation for 5 years or something. I could see that you would like, and your mission statement be like, and no more transformation. We will not transform anymore. We're going to stay the same. That would be understandable, but y'all are gluttons for punishment, I suppose. So you want to change more, but that's an interesting question. All right, so what do you want to change into? And that's the thing. Like I would just say, what is it's what do you want to be that you are not? And really imagine that. What does that look like personally? Not for the congregation and not for anybody else outside the congregation. Right? And what are you willing to lose that you love in order to make that happen? But it's going to be something, and it doesn't have to be bad, but it's going to be something. And so like I'm less opposed to the word transformation now, Debbie, than I was, but I still I actually like the word. I always have liked the word, or the concept anyway. I just want it to mean something. Yeah. And so it means something when you have, I think, a dream, like a real solid dream attached to it, right. So there was a real solid dream attached to moving. And there was a cost also, right? And I mean, lots of costs. But now you've got that transformation almost complete. And hopefully, I think it will have been worthwhile and worth the cost. And so that's like a real transformation. And you can kind of look back on that and say, all right, so I want to make a spiritual transformation now. Like, it's the same road,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and hopefully it'll be worth it with
Mm.
with less arguing over paint colors. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. I guess I'm curious about a blessing for their next step.
Yeah. So I'll tell a little story. Up here in Canada, um, cannabis is legal. And Katie, my wife, works in a cannabis store. And so it's around. And I've been exploring using it ceremonially in prayer life and things like that. And so a while ago, I smoked some and then put on some music, and I sat down to just be open to whatever came my way. And the first, as soon as the music rolled in and the um, altered consciousness took effect, I thought, oh crap. And I just got like, it was like overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
And my first reaction to that um, was to say, it just emerged out of my being. And I said, I ask for blessings on this journey. And then the image that came to me was of standing on the edge of a very dark forest, knowing that there's all kinds of things in that forest, that the forest itself is alive. There are various levels of being in that woods that has their own agenda.
Mm.
And I was going to need to navigate that. And I was, in many ways, almost in all ways, at the mercy of all those levels of being, from the forest writ large as a single entity to the various animals and individual blades of grasses and everything, right? So like just this massive interdependent series of beings that I was going to pass through, and I was at their mercy. And that's what I was asking. That's what I was asking for blessings for. And ever since that moment, I feel like I finally understand what it is to ask for a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It is to put oneself at the mercy of an interdependence of being that is too intricate and fathomless to name. And so it is with that in mind, with that in our hearts,
Mm.
not knowing what lies ahead, that I ask for blessings on the journey of the good people of Mountain Vista as they move together into a new rooted place. I ask for moments of rest and togetherness. I ask for the opportunity to hear each other's voices raised in song. I ask or a roof overhead to be the thing that takes the limits off. I ask for pride of place and the feeling of home. And actually, Sam, that brings me back to one thing that I learned quite directly um, from John. Um, beloved sparring partner at Mountain Vista, who gave me a bit of wisdom that I have kept with me to this day and will always keep with me. And that is that something along the line, I mean, it's maybe evolved since our conversation to some degree. I don't actually know, but I know it was rooted there, and maybe it's the same. And that is that spirituality, like a spiritual experience is an experience of home.
Mm.
That feeling is a spiritual experience, and I've used that in my own personal life and ministerially ever since that series of conversations that he and I had. I just love it. I love it. I mean, even like it lends itself sonically to some meditative, chanting stuff too, right? And just the recognition of you recognizing a place and a place recognizing you as a spiritual experience. I mean, it is little I indigenous. It is what we need most in the world right now, is to feel home. And I am just really happy that Mountain Vista is going to get a chance to have that spiritual experience soon. For real.
For reals.
Would you like to speak with the minister? My little MVUU guest form asked me innocently. I had no idea the chain of events I started when I checked yes. A few days later, I got a call from Reverend Ron Ferris. And when we met up to talk, I remember how quickly the conversation went from a casual, so what's up kind of vibe to a deeply emotional exploration of the string of tragedies that led me back to the desert in late 2018. I told him about the losses, the pain, the hardship, the deep, deep grief I was suffering, and the absolute emptiness I felt inside. The feeling of being so lost and so sure somehow that I was being called back here for this reason I couldn't put my finger on. This place, Tucson, that I have thought of as home. I was convinced that there was something I was supposed to be doing with these experiences, something that could be of benefit. I was being called back to the desert for a higher spiritual purpose and connectivity to the universe. I knew I had to come back, and I had no idea why. And now there I was with my grief and a calling for 4 hours in the Arizona sunshine on a bench in the desert with a minister. I'll never forget the way I felt when he suggested to me that this yearning, this longing for a feeling of home, my desire to connect to something bigger than myself, that calling I kept mentioning meant something very specific to someone like him. This feeling was this crazy vibration from inside and a warmth that washed over me, kind of comforting, but also a little bit like I was about to throw up. It was lovely, but obviously this crazy person could not be suggesting that me, in some way, that I could do some form of ministry. I mean, I had no business leading anyone or anything anywhere. Jump forward a few weeks later, I went back to Chicago for a cabaret that I'd put together to explore the themes of post-traumatic growth through the performing arts. We talked about pain and abuse and trauma and the hardship of all shapes and sizes. We sang about it, we laughed about it, we cried together, and we examined the lessons that we gained from the things that we'd been through, where we found our light in the darkness. It was absolute magic. And I remember delivering the story of being in the desert that afternoon as if it was a pure comedy. I mean, can you picture it? Me, a minister, doing any kind of inspiring or spiritual guiding in any way? I mean, this guy seems nice, but I mean, I know me. I know where I've been. I remember my 20s, most of it, some of it. I've heard stories. But how could I possibly be worthy of such a thing? And then talking to people after the show, to my great surprise, not one of them thought it was funny. Friends new and old who were well aware of my scandalous past, my wild adventures, my traumas that broke me, it made perfect sense to them. And strangers turned into friends who just experienced me ripping my broken heart out of my chest and dipping it in sparkles for a live audience, immediately reflecting back to me that I basically did minister to them only a few fancy cocktails ago. Out of everyone, I was the only one baffled by the suggestion. So jumping forward again, I came back to Tucson and I became a PA and a member of this amazing congregation where I continue to share my experiences in services, during joys and sorrows, during fellowship, in cabarets, in the stunning living rooms of Jane and Conrad Paul, in future cabarets to come. Through this exploration, I feel not only a sense of purpose, but the beginnings of a deep, deep forgiveness for myself, the deeds of my past and missteps, bad behaviors, the traumas and tragedies out of my control that broke me in ways I never thought I'd survive. And in that acceptance of self grew an appreciation and a gratitude that I had to face my faults and struggles to find. Maybe that minister on a bench in the desert wasn't so crazy after all. So what's the point of sharing this story with you? It's easy to love ourselves and others when things are going well and feeling good, and we have tangible deeds that we can tally up. But the really good stuff doesn't come pre-packed with sunshine and sparkles. Sometimes transformation is ugly, raw, painful work. And what makes it inspiring is just the fact that you showed up to do it. So I'm going to do my best to keep showing up and keep pushing through. And I invite you to join me as you're able. And when our individual lights aren't feeling so bright, we can combine them together and find our way through the darkness. Thank you.
For another angle, I'm reminded of a dear mentor of mine. He was a Jesuit priest at one point, a Buddhist, a social worker, and an artist, a photographer. And he and I worked together, he as my mentor and me as an intern at a re-entry program in downtown Los Angeles. And it was in particular a re-entry program for folks who were just coming out of years and years and years of incarceration, often for gang involvement. And it was a thriving, wild, rowdy organization. But this particular person moved through this world in a very specific way. And each day when I was there on site interning, we would meet and we would talk. And usually it ended up with him telling stories. Now, his life was not very big. It was simple. He had taken a vow of poverty, but it was always inspired. The way he moved and met the world meant that he always had a story about the world. And I feel like there's a unique thing here. It wasn't that miraculous things happened to him. It's that he met the world with a photographer's eye and a Jesuit Buddhist heart and a social worker's embrace. And when you meet the world that way, which is a choice, you always have a story about the world. And he would do things like go to the Goodwill. There was a huge Goodwill in Los Angeles. And he liked in particular to go to an auction zone where you could buy up these kind of clear plastic bins of fabric, and you have no clue what's in it except what you think you see on the outside. And his favorite place to buy clothes was from the bins that you couldn't see into. And if that's not a metaphor for an artist's approach to life, I don't know what is. And he would buy these bins knowing there would be treasure. And he would bring them to his photography studio where families of young ones and children and brothers and uncles and grandparents who had just been released from prison could come and dress up. And he would take these miraculous photos of families reunited on the edge of a journey or in the midst of a journey, didn't matter. wrapped in fabric that he knew was treasure. And his office was covered in these wild photos of all these different family members. And it was his inspired way of being that made it magical. And inspiration, that word, is a juicy one. If you go digging into its story and its history, it literally means to breathe life or to set aflame something. And so another angle on this inspiring transformation value might be that what we are committing to is an inspired relationship to change, with change being the constant and the nature of the world. The basis of our religion or our spirituality or our ethics, you choose, is that we choose an inspired, embracing relationship to what is the nature of our world. And I think of this priest, social worker, artist as living in a house where he would sit on the front porch greeting the horizon that was emerging. And this is a metaphor we use for the word liberal in terms of liberal religion, spirituality, or ethics, not necessarily the politics, but a liberal religious ethic suggests that you welcome what is on the horizon. Now, the beauty of living in a house together is that not all of us have to be on the porch. Now, I know some of you are tired of being on the porch of transformation. That's the great thing of being a community. Some of us will go to the porch. We will greet transformation with open arms. There are other jobs to do in a house that is livable. So here we are, a place that embraces change. And that's not to say that we willy-nilly change just because it's hip or cool or correct. But what it does suggest is that if you can have a relationship to what is changing, that you are actually kind of sturdy and powerful and promising. There's something promising about being a being that is willing to change and is inspired by what is changing in others. And this is one reason I love being part of liberal religious community. It's because I want to give the world and people and myself permission to change. I think it offers a security rooted in dynamicism. And the spiritual practice then is to stay inspired by it, to breathe life into it. And as Ron was lovely reminding us, to engage with the cost of what is required of you to make it possible. Now, several services ago, I preached about a book, Fault Lines, Fractured Families and How to Heal Them. It was a book about family estrangement. And since then, 3 of you have casually admitted to me that you're reading it, and maybe there's more of you. And it's a book, it's a piece of work about estrangements. So the things that disconnect us from each other. And tucked into that book are tips for how to stay connected. And one of the tips that I love is that if you want to stay in relationship with someone, you have to believe that they're constantly changing. And so are you. And the trouble with an estrangement is that we often only remember the moment of rupture, the moment that something went really bad, and they and we become frozen in time. But what allows a relationship freely chosen, not coerced, but a freely chosen relationship to be viable, as in to actually give life, is to allow things to be changed in it. Another kind of psychologist, therapist, marriage and couples therapist is Esther Perel. She's very famous, lots of podcasts. But she talks about the paradox of being in a real relationship with someone. And it's that security and love longs for closeness, familiarity. It longs to be known for what's knowable, what's predictable. It longs for the meal plan and the cozy pajamas. But eroticism, that is passion, excitement, inspiration, thrives on what is unknowable. To be in relationship with anyone or anything, meaning our world included, is to live. It's the practice of living in constant paradox about what is known and what is unknown. Change, what is emerging. So our relationship to anything, a child, a partner, a community, the universe, is inspired when we know we cannot know it fully, and we delight and invite the paradox of it. So yes, every church says it supports transformation, but perhaps what we seek to cultivate here when we say inspiring transformation is that here together we practice a relationship with change that is inspired, as in we breathe life into it. We are not waiting for the divine other to breathe life into the world, because it is our practice to do it together. And perhaps that's what makes this community rooted and growing, is this belief and this permission and this hope that we believe you are not done changing, even and ultimately into your death, and neither are we. And with that, I'm going to invite you to turn to your neighbor one last time this month and to offer just what's on the top of your heart. And if your neighbor doesn't show up to the breakout room, come on back, and we'll see you in a few minutes.
Voice still and small, deep beside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain, singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing. Ooh, 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 ooh.
As we close out today and extinguish our chalice, I would like to share a short piece with you by Eric Walker Wickstrom called "The Purpose of This Community is to Help Its People Grow." If you are who you were, and if the person next to you is who he or she was, if none of us has changed since the day we came in here, we have failed. The purpose of this community, of any church, temple, zendo, mosque, is to help its people grow. We do this through encounters with the unknown, in ourselves, in one another, in the other, whoever that might be for us, however hard that might be, because these encounters have many gifts to offer. So may you go forth from here this morning, not who you were, but who you could be. And so may we all.